So as we continue on looking through free agency, though, like we have to bring one of my favorite looks, grids, is the Mike Clay unrestricted free agency sheet, because it does a really great job of showing you all the players that are available at the moment. This was at the beginning of the day, so it's not going to have any of the Bills cuts on it, obviously, but you see some really talented names here, and ones that I want to see the Bills start to really dive into. So there's some top end safeties, Xavier McKinney, you have Diggs, Quandre Diggs, you have Kevin Byard, Cameron Krill, Savage. You have a ton of safety, just like half the safeties in the league. Then you see Rapp is on this list here toward he is above Jeremy Chin, everybody's favorite Jeremy Chin. Mike Clay did rank Taylor Rapp above him there. So I do believe they're similar style of players. Chin's a little bit different, but that's a really good position I'm looking at. Defensive interior tackle, you have Chris Jones, Leonard Williams, Christian Wilkins. Will they go top end at one of these positions? The Bills will now have the money to. Would you rather look at a Marquise Brown or Kelvin Ridley? Gabe Davis is third on the free agency list, guys, and this is unbiased. This isn't someone that likes the Bills. What does everyone think about that, Kevin? Number 3? So like us saying we don't want the third best free agent receiver is a little bit weird. I know we want different, but that's still a little weird, especially if he came back at the right value. But then you have people like pressing, like I really want Donovan Peoples-Jones or KJ Osborne or Noah Brown or Kendrick Bourne, who's on an ACL. Like, that's still weird to me that you would prefer one of those guys over maybe Gabe Davis. Like, really, there's only 4 players that I may take over him, especially at a similar price point, like Ridley, Marquise Brown, Tyler Boyd, maybe Curtis Samuel, Odell Beckham Jr. But it's not a huge list. There's some people that would probably take Gabe over OBJ. So that's what's kind of interesting to me. So I want to ask you, if you look at this list the best that you can, and you had to sign one top tier position, where's it going to be?
I just want to say real quick, when you were asking about any Bills free agents that I want them to re-sign, and I said Epinesa, I still agree with that, but I totally missed Daquan Jones. That one has to get done. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, but I just want to clarify. I do want Epinesa back, but I definitely want Daquan back. And when you were going over those defensive tackles, I started thinking about that. I was like, wouldn't that be funny if Brandon Beane somehow gets Christian Wilkins to come here after it looks like his days in Miami might be done, and we know his relationship with Josh Allen. And I was like, man, wouldn't that come full circle if you somehow get Christian Wilkins to come here? But then I was thinking, no, because I want Daquan Jones here no matter what. So I don't think you're going to spend money on Daquan and another top defensive tackle. So my answer to combine both of those questions, I want Daquan Jones here as the one tech to pair with Ed Oliver for at least 2 more years. And then outside of that, I don't really have like a key free agent target, because I think that my main target is a wide receiver too, but I think that needs to be found in the draft. Now, I think there are still a lot of solid wide receivers here, and maybe now after today's moves, safety and free agency becomes a little bit more of a pressing need for me. So I would say either finding a wide receiver or a safety is at the top of my wish list here in terms of free agency.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is, do you think that after making these moves today, Kevin, think about it for a second. That's why I picked AJ. I knew about Daquan Jones. Why I picked AJ Epinesa is because I think he fits the age and the mold of the new window. Knowing what you know about window 2, do you still go Daquan? I know good he is, but do you still go Daquan Jones, knowing they just cut Trey White, they just cut Mitch Morse, they just cut Jordan Poyer, they're not going to re-sign Micah Hyde? Like, at some point, that's a different mission. So do you think that they don't care about that when it comes to him? Because I think that ship may have sailed, especially at a certain price point.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point, because maybe that's part of the reason why I left him off my list in the first place, because AJ Epinesa is within that age range and Daquan isn't. So, I mean, to your point, you're right. I mean, maybe Brandon Beane is setting us up to not re-sign Daquan Jones. And in that case, as much as I said this as a joke, because as people are saying in the comments here, like, Christian Wilkins obviously loves Josh Allen and can't keep his hands off of him. I mean, is that more realistic now, that maybe you pool more of that money towards getting a Christian Wilkins who's younger and probably maybe a little bit better just based on his age than Daquan Jones?
Yes, it's fully realistic. And I guess that's the point of we were, trying to make about window two is that you enter. Let's recap window two real quickly. Window one has now been shut. The difference is window two is opening, and you're entering window two with 8 players on rookie deals that are playing, that are meaningful contributors. You got a next step from Khalil Shakir. You have the next step from Dalton Kincaid. You have the next step from Christian Benford. You have the next step from James Cook. So you're starting window two with those players on top of 11 draft choices that aren't going to cost you anything against the cap, roughly $3 million total for the whole slew of draft class. And then you're looking at a situation, you're bringing in obviously the top end quarterback and the top end Diggs and other players that you're still bringing over. The maybe one of the best linebacking core we got robbed of seeing this year in Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano. I mean, that is such a quality linebacking core. That I'm and you have Ed Oliver developing. So there is a talent at cornerback still. The O-line played as well as possible. I mean, it really was one of the best O-lines in the league and the best O-lines that Josh Allen has had. Yes, they made a little bit of a switch, but these are guys, 4 starters that are returning and a guy that was their main backup last year returning as well on basically a starter salary. And then bringing back Taylor Rapp, who's been in the system and now really only needing to fill one safety. I had Taylor Rapp on a bunch of people's lists that I saw of players they wanted to resign. So he did enough at the end of the year. Yes, he struggled at times, but he showed me a lot come the end of the year. I didn't really think that the player fit, but it took him a little while to learn, and the Bills definitely agreed. But all that being said, I think it's very, very possible the Bills go after one splash signing now. They didn't make those moves to just make those moves and have fun and get to the cap floor. They could have done that. We talked about how they could do that. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs restructures, maybe asking, in my opinion, asking Vaughn to take, cutting Hardy, cutting Hines, cutting Saran Neal. So some of those moves that did happen were the way to get back to the floor. But they're going to do more than the floor. They're going to restructure Josh. We'll see what they do with Diggs. They're going to give some extensions out, most likely. I don't think they're going to want all those players on walk years. They're going to have money and not a million holes, enough holes. Would you rather, there's running backs there. There's every running back in the league. So does Brandon Beane finally. Real quickly, I wanted to bring this up one more for running back. Barkley, Jacobs, Henry, Eckler, DeAndre Swift, Pollard, Alexander Madison, J.K. Dobbins coming off an injury, but has been nice in his career. Gibson. There are some names here that is as good as it's ever been, and they're not going to be in millions. They're not going to be double digits. So does he finally get a running back? Does he finally get a safety, top-end safety? Or McDermott likes to develop safety, so maybe that's a draft pick too. So all that kind of wrapped into one bow is the position defensive tackle. And instead of Daquan Jones, do they make a phone call to one of those top guys at the top of the board? Would you be shocked?
No, I guess, I'm glad we're having this conversation because that's why I think it's important that we talk through this, because leave that up for a second, because I want to take a look at some of these edge rushers and defensive tackles, because I could totally see the Bills spending some money on defensive line and free agency so they feel like they don't have to allocate those resources to that position early on in the draft, and they can stay true to their board and try to get that wide receiver. So now that they open up this much money, it could be realistic that they could maybe go get, let's say, a Jadeveon Clowney, or, to our point earlier, Christian Wilkins, or one of those guys. I mean, Daniil Hunter, that's probably too much money right there. Chase Young, I don't think that he fits their mold. Like Shaq Barrett, that could be interesting. Jonathan Greenard, maybe. One of those guys like that where you're thinking, all right, this guy is totally out of the Bills' price range. But what if they have a Von Miller scenario where it's like, holy cow, how are we able to finesse him based on the cap hits and the salary cap to get him to come here? So as much as we started with this conversation, I was like, you know what? I think they're just going to kind of fill out their depth and rotational pieces here. They really might go after one of these top guys now. Leonard Williams, Chris Jones. I mean, I think that's still a little bit too rich for their blood. But still, I guess what I'm trying to say is I won't be shocked if we see a splash signing now.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is okay, let's recap last year too, where I was on our show going to Buffalo, and everybody was talking about right tackle, and Spencer Brown became who he is, and really an entrenched top 20 tackle in the league. He's really good. Linebacker, we talked about linebacker ad nauseum. We talked about Terrell Bernard. Oh my God, he wasn't even in the mentions. Everybody was talking about this and that, needing to draft Simpson or Jack Campbell. Not even in the have we talked about linebacker or right tackle once? Those are the two positions come August that we would have been begging to take, begging right now to look at this list and say, you still have Bobby Wagner back on, but you have Jordan Hicks or Patrick Queen or Frankie Louvu. These would have been guys we would have been begging for right now. Linebacker's no longer in the discussion because it doesn't need to be. You have an all-pro next to a guy that was basically like all-world in Terrell Bernard at times last year, and really think the Bills beat the Chiefs with their starting linebackers. It's one of the biggest positions that Andy Reid targets. I think that's a completely different game with even one of them. So the Bills are returning their linebackers. But what's interesting too is we could be talking about tackle right now. Why wouldn't we be talking about a Trent Brown or a Fleming or a Charles Leno? Like there's guys out there that we could have been talking about right now. But once again, we're not needing to talk about right tackle and right tackle and linebacker. So I think that you pivot to interior D-line. And possibly instead of using the money that now we know what Brandon Beane's saying, we do have a tell. The tell is that he cut his older players. He didn't have to do that. He could have made other moves. The tell is that he wanted to free up enough money to sign somebody, in my opinion. What position will it be at? That current receiver doesn't really get to me that much unless you're really targeting Calvin Ridley or Marquise Brown or something. It doesn't really, because the next best guy you could argue is Gabe Davis. So I don't know how much that really gets me. I think you're probably going to look at a guy like Noah Brown or DJ Chark or Odell Beckham Jr., maybe Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd. But I think really the position is interior D-line, and the Bills saw the free agency class on Monday, and they want to make Brandon Beane's not going to sit there. He wants to make some phone calls, and he needed to be in a position to not just kick tires with agents and say, look, I cut some players so that I could have a chance to get Leonard Williams or Christian Wilkins, maybe even a DJ Reader at one tech. I've seen some people compare, Sweat to him in the draft class. And I'm like, well, you could just get DJ Reader too. Like at the same time, like you could just get who he could be, plug him right in there. So there's some definite names in here that the Bills could go after, especially with Josh Allen already throwing to Diggs and Shakir. And they're going to get a draft receiver. I think they're going to get two. So how pressing is a receiver in free agency, especially with the names we're now looking at? I don't know, man. It's not overly pressing. Like I don't need to have DJ Chark on my roster. Like it'd be interesting, it'd be fun, but it's not going to overly move the needle for me come draft day. So that's why I think the players that do are those D linemen that you mentioned. Who could he be targeting? I don't know, but we do know he was looking at defensive tackle in the NFL draft the year Christian Wilkins was drafted, and obviously went at Oliver. So could that be a natural pairing? I mean, you could argue that with that kind of pairing and that linebacking core and those corners, Kevin, you can argue that may be a new way to try to get Mahomes out of rhythm. So I wouldn't be shocked by a defensive lineman signing, and maybe it comes at the interior this time, rather than paying for a edge rusher like Zadarius Smith or Danielle Hunter. But maybe they just say, we're going to get after it at the defensive end spot. We're going to continue to spend money there until we get it right. And the Bills almost got it right last year.
Yeah. The more we talk about this, the more that I'm warming up to the idea of sinking some money into the defensive line. Because again, I don't want to fall into the trap of drafting one early, and I still want to be on the wide receiver train. So I'm thinking that we really could see a splash signing on the defensive line in the coming days here. But something that I was also thinking about, now you mentioned this too, could these moves, because to your point earlier, the Bills are still somewhere between, we'll just say 10 million over and 10 million under. We don't have the official numbers, so they're somewhere around the cap floor right now when it's all said and done. Now, they do have a lot of moves that can get them up to that $50 million mark that you set. But I don't want to make it seem like the Bills have some of the most money in the NFL now. So let's look at the other angle too, where they say, you know what? We're still going to do what we planned on doing before all these moves were made. And now with that extra few $1 million, do you go get a Marquise Brown? Because we were talking a couple of weeks ago, do you get a Marquise Brown or a Noah Brown? And I said, maybe Noah, just based on the cap situation. But now with this extra money, you could say, let's go get Hollywood Brown. So then do you sink more money into the wide receiver position, knowing that you're still probably going to draft one? Or do you say, well, we're going to draft one, so that means that we should go sign a defensive tackle or a defensive end? So it's just very fascinating to see how they're going to put this together. Because you could also look at it and say, well, now we want to draft a defensive tackle, so let's go sign a Calvin Ridley.
We talked about like the hard parts of this, but the good parts of this situation are that the Bills have more money to spend. I do think, so let's go back to our wish list, original wish list prior to today. I do think that each of these players, so like Locke and Edwards, so Locke is going to be, Trubisky, Edwards is Edwards, but I think each of the remaining players, I think that you can take a tick above most of those guys. I think that we're already factoring in or go for one really high end guy and then the rest this list. But I think for the most part, you can go a tick above pretty much most players on this list. So, maybe you do bring back Epinesa and then you can upgrade Gross Matos with, maybe a tick above that. Maybe in a situation where you're looking at like, I don't know, could you go for a Shaquille Barrett or, Zadarius Smith even? And in the interior spot, do you go all the way up to Christian Wilkins? So my wish list has changed. My wish list is try to get a top end receiver. If you can't, and it's crazy, I don't really want one. I truthfully don't need to give him snaps. You have Justin Shorter waiting in the wings. You have two other guys that are going to get a lot of playing time in Diggs and Shakir. Go get a low end guy, go pick up, whatever you think may be able to do something for you a little bit, give Josh Reynolds a try. I don't mean to call him low end, but get a more low end type of guy. And then go get two rookies. Like seriously, get two rookies on a rookie deal with this loaded draft class. And then I'm pivoting my money. I'm literally pivoting my money to defensive tackle. I am merging what I thought they may pay a situation with Daquan Jones and Greg Gaines or something. And I'm doing whatever I can to score a top end interior defensive lineman to pair. Is it DJ Reader? Is it you go all the way up to Christian Wilkins or Leonard Williams? That is what I do. That is my free agent current wish list is getting a top interior D lineman to pair with that Oliver because the interior pressure against these top end quarterbacks with our linebacking core is what I think the Bills need to do. Especially if you can't get in touch with a higher end receiver, I'm going to put all my money that I've just saved by cutting some old players, and I'm going after a young interior defensive lineman. What are you think? And then I'm probably staying the par on the rest of our players because I'm probably going to sink my money into like getting after these premier quarterbacks. So where are you at now with the changes to your wish list?
Well, let's look. So, like you said, Drew Lock became Trubisky. Edwards is Edwards. I still like Deontay Foreman for that price, so I'm going to stay there. Wide receiver, though, you said Tyler Boyd. I had Noah Brown. We had similar price ranges. I'm going to go a few $1 million above and say I'm willing to spend, 10 to 12 million on Hollywood Brown. I don't know if he's going to cost that much, but I'm just saying if you have to go above that $7 million that we set, then I'm okay with that now. Now, defensive tackle is interesting because I still think that I would want Daquan back along with Greg Gaines for those contracts or those cap hits at least, because them together will still be a lot cheaper than someone like Christian Wilkins. And I know Wilkins is great, but I'm thinking that Beane's going to want to draft a defensive tackle. And I think you can get the same amount of production between Jones and Gaines that you can with Wilkins for about $10 million less. So, I mean, like to our conversation earlier, like I agree. I think that is pretty juicy now thinking about the money that we could spend and try to allocate our sources that way. But I think I'm still going to stay with Greg Gaines and Daquan Jones. But again, I would not be shocked or even upset if he wanted to go get like a DJ Reader or Christian Wilkins, Leonard Williams. We already talked about Gross Matos. I will stay there for now. But like if they can get Jadeveon Clowney, Jonathan Greenard, one of those guys in that $7 to $10 million range, then okay, do it. I definitely want AJ Epinesa back, as I've already said. Troy Reader, I think he's a solid third or fourth linebacker that you can pair behind Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano. You can pair him with Dorian Williams because I think he has an inside-outside versatility that him and Williams would play off of each other very well. And he's a former Ram, so he has a lot of familiarity with some of these players on the Bills defense. And then safety, I mean, I don't know, because Jeremy Chin, I've seen his market value go anywhere from 6 to 16 million. So maybe that's like a perfect example where Jeremy Chin is going to be more expensive than maybe Beane was thinking. And now you can put that money there and you don't have to feel as bad about giving him an AAV of $10 million per year. I think Quandre Diggs is interesting too. There are a couple other guys that were on that list where I was like, okay, maybe the Bills can sink a little bit more money into this now where we don't have to feel as bad. But I'm thinking that I would probably go above that $3 million cap hit now that we had given to Darnell Savage. And let's just say it's, 8 to 10 for Jeremy Chin. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about Chin is like I think his natural player position would have been somewhere where Rapp would be. So I think they may be looking more at like a free safety style of position. It's not to say they couldn't player match like that. I just think like a Savage would make a little bit more sense, or another player, especially now with the Rapp being back and getting a decent sized deal. That I think they may go more of the traditional free safety look, and a Xavier McKinney style. The Savage, even a Jordan Whitehead really makes sense. Geno Stone, there's a couple names there that could fit the bill for the Bills, depending on what they're looking for. But I think, yeah, linebacker, absolutely. We have them adding Troy Reader, and I think that it's possible they'll entertain a draft pick there. Maybe it's the end of the third, as they've been doing for back-to-back seasons. But it's a position that the Bills need to think. But they have thought about it. They have Bernard and Dorian Williams, and as well as Balin Spector. So they have thought about it. They have sunk some rookie assets into it. All three of them being players that, look, you would have saw in the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes. You would have saw Spector had he not got hurt. So it's very they like those three young guys a whole lot. So they do have them in the pipeline. Do they add someone else? Maybe, but I think they more add like a Reader. But sure, nothing's going to stop them if they like a linebacker in the fourth or fifth. Of course, they're going to add them to continue that depth, especially if they lose Dodson. So it's a fair thing, but I think they're going to more replace that with a linebacker style there. But look, Kevin, we need to add money somewhere. For me, it's defensive tackle. I think for you, you're thinking receiver, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, it sounds like for you, you're willing to like put that money into a specific position, and I think I'm going to take that. Let's just say we have an extra 10 to 15 million dollars that we didn't think that we're going to have, maybe even 10 to 20, and I'm going to spread that out between wide receiver, safety, and defensive line. So I don't want to go after like one specific player and say, oh, now we have an extra 20 million to go get Christian Wilkins. It's just a simple matter of, okay, maybe we can get an upgrade over Noah Brown and get Hollywood Brown. And maybe now we can get Jeremy Chin instead of Darnell Savage. And maybe now we can get Yatur Gross Matos at a better rate than what we had originally planned on. Something like that. So I think I'm just trying to spread it out a little bit more rather than going after one specific position.